Hooper?
I'm in here.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to be starting the lesson on accents, so let me get the screen up. Okay, we begin our lesson on accents. This is lesson number 9. The general objectives of this lesson are: 1, to examine the syllables of a word that may take an accent. 2, to examine the syllable of a word where an accent usually is. 3, to examine the symbol of an accent when it occurs where an accent usually is not placed. 4, to examine the accent to indicate the syllable to be stressed. 5, to examine the accent to indicate punctuation. 6, to examine the accent to indicate musical signs. The specific objectives are: at the end of this lesson, the students will have identified the 2 syllables of a word which may take an accent. 2, at the end of this lesson, the students will have identified the syllable of a word which usually takes an accent. 3, at the end of this lesson, the students will have identified the symbol of the accent when it is placed on the syllable that is immediately before the last syllable. 4, at the end of this lesson, the students will have identified 3 uses of accents. So let us look at syllables that may take the accent and symbol of the accent when it is placed on a syllable that does not usually take the accent. First of all, accents are mostly placed on the last syllable of a word, and it occurs so often as a rule rather than the exception that in Hebrew grammars they often do not use any symbol to indicate where the accent is. It is taken for granted that the accent is on the last syllable of a word. But there are some Hebrew words that have the accent on a syllable different from the last syllable of the word. If the accent is placed on the syllable before the last syllable, it is indicated by the arrowhead symbol. And here is the arrowhead symbol. It looks like the arrowhead on an arrow. That's what you will find in different Hebrew grammars to indicate that that is the syllable you need to stress. You won't see this on the last syllable because it is taken for granted that an accent will be on the last syllable. However, whenever it is not on the last syllable, then you have to be shown where the accent is by this arrowhead over the syllable. And that syllable is the syllable before the last syllable. It is the syllable before the last syllable. Now, what I found after I studied from Hebrew grammars is that when I started to read the Hebrew Bible, I realized I did not find this arrowhead as a symbol of the accent. This arrowhead is what I found in the Hebrew grammars. But in the Hebrew Bible itself, the accents have many different shapes, as we will see in the next slide of Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. But since we are in the beginner stage of learning Hebrew, whenever the accent is not over the last syllable, you will see where it is by this symbol, this arrowhead symbol, which marks the syllable that has the accent when the accent is not placed on the last syllable of a word. Now, number 3, accents are never placed on the second syllable before the last syllable. Let us say that a word has 3 syllables in it, and the accent is on the last syllable. Or, sorry, no, you have 3 syllables in a word. You will never find this arrowhead over the first syllable of that word, because an accent cannot go on a syllable that is 2 syllables away from the last syllable. So in a word that has 3 syllables, this would only apply. In a word that has 3 syllables, this is what would apply. You cannot expect to find the symbol of an accent on that first syllable, which is 2 syllables, on that first syllable. Accents never are placed on the second syllable before the last syllable. Okay, let me say that one more time. In a word that has 3 syllables, any word in the Hebrew that has 3 syllables, you will never find an accent symbol placed on the first syllable of that word, because that would break the rule that accents are not to be placed on the second syllable before the last syllable. The second syllable before the last syllable is the first syllable of a word. Okay? Now, let me go to another situation. Let us say that the word only has 2 syllables in it, not 3, just 2 syllables. Then an accent can go on that first syllable. You know why? Because that syllable would be immediately before the last syllable. It would just be 1 syllable away from the last syllable. This rule here in number 3 doesn't apply to words that have 2 syllables, nor to words that have 1 syllable. It applies only to words that have 3 syllables. If a word has 3 syllables, the accent will not go on that first syllable because it will be 2 syllables away from the last syllable. Now, I know this sounds confusing, so let me stop and ask, are there any questions over anything in this screen here?
No, sir, not yet, sir.
Anyone else?
Not yet,
Okay.
sir.
Okay, let me move on then. Now, this is copied. I wrote it by hand from the Hebrew Bible, Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. I wrote everything that I saw in the Hebrew Bible in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. Now here you have Bereshith bara Elohim, Eith Hashemayim ve'Eith Haaretz. Now I want you to notice these strange looking shapes. Here is one shape. Here is another shape. Here is another shape. Here is another. There is another shape here, still another, and still another, and see another. What a lot of different shapes. These shapes are the different accents. Now, when you see the accent, it is a sign. It has different uses, as I will be talking about in the next few minutes. But when you see an accent, it means that you are to emphasize that particular syllable. So in this word, bereshith, this is the very last syllable of the word. And it is indicating that the last syllable is to be what? The last syllable is to be what? Emphasized. The last syllable is to be emphasized. To emphasize it, you raise your voice, or you slow down your pronunciation of it. Bereshit. I have emphasized the last syllable. Bereshit. Bereshit. I'm not rushing. I'm now coming to the last syllable. Bereshit. I've rushed through the first two syllables. Be, re, these are two, and this is a third syllable, sheath. Bereshith. Wherever I see an accent, I must slow down and I must emphasize that syllable. So this is bereshith. This other word, notice another accent indicators there. The two syllables are ba, ra, ba, ra. And this is the last syllable of bara. This word has two syllables, and this is the last syllable of bara. What does this syllable mean? Sorry, what does the symbol mean that I should do to this syllable?
You need to raise your voice and slow down on it.
That's right. I am to raise my voice and slow down. So that means I'm to emphasize or stress that syllable.
Yes,
So it is bara. That is why I come down heavily on the ra, because that is the syllable that is to be emphasized or stressed. Then the third word here is Elohim. Elohim is the usual spelling for God. I have taught you another word, and that was El.
Yes,
But this
sir.
is the common word for God. It is actually in its plural form. El is singular, but Elohim is plural. It does not necessarily mean gods when it is referring to the one true God of the Bible. It is translated in the singular as God. It is in the plural to show how great God is. He is great, for he is the creator of the heavens and the earth. So it is showing his greatness or his majesty. But notice this shape. I'm trying to get the pointer. I know it's there somewhere. That shape on the last syllable of Elohim, the syllable him, that indicates again that you are to do what to that syllable?
Emphasize on it, sir.
Emphasize that syllable.
Yes, sir.
Good. Now notice the second line of Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. And remember, I'm reading from the right side to the left side. So the next word is eighth. Now, eighth, as you will learn much later, is a sign of the direct object in the Hebrew language. It is not actually translated into English, but it is a mark or a sign that the next word that comes after it is a direct object in the sentence. The verb is bara, and eighth is indicating that the word that comes after it, hashemayim, is a direct object of bara. But notice that eighth itself has a mark underneath it. Now I have my pointer. You see this mark here? That's another accent mark. Now this word has only one syllable.
Yes, sir.
And therefore there is no other place for the accent to go but this syllable. It is the only syllable there is. And so it indicates that this word is to be stressed. This syllable is to be stressed. Eighth, eighth. Now, ha-shamayim. Notice this shape, which is under the third syllable. You have ha or hash, sha, ma. So hash, sha, ma. This is the third syllable. There is an accent mark under the third syllable. What does that mean that we should do to this third syllable? We need to emphasize it, to stress it.
Yes,
Raise our
sir.
voice, slow down when we come to that syllable. Hashamayim, hashamayim. Again, this is eighth, just like over here. This is another marker or a sign that what comes after it is the direct object. And this other direct object, along with hashamayim, is the object of the verb bara. This is ha-aretz. So here is an accent mark indicating that you stress eighth. Another accent mark is this vertical line to the left of kames. And you will learn about it shortly. It is called siluk. It is a pause in the pronunciation of the word, and it always comes at the end of a verse, in the last word of the verse in the Bible, in the Hebrew, indicating that you pause before you pronounce the last syllable. Haaretz. Okay, so this is an accent mark. And these two diamond-shaped objects are also an accent mark. It is like our full stop or period in English. It indicates that this is the end of the verse in the Hebrew. So these two diamond-shaped objects, one above the other, is like our period or full stop in punctuation. What we see is that the accents have different shapes. It is not just an arrowhead. In fact, the closest that comes to an arrowhead in this verse is this one right here. But it's not shaped like what we saw in the previous screen. And so in the Bible itself, there are different shapes to the accents, and the accents show what syllable in the word is to be emphasized. Sheet, ra, him, eighth, ma, eighth, ah. It indicates the particular syllable to be emphasized. Now, let us look in more detail at three uses of the accent. What I just did was to show you the different shapes of the accents that are in the Hebrew Bible, just in the very first verse of the Bible. Now, each word has, apart from vowels, a small sign. These small signs are the accents. As you see, apart from the vowels, these are vowels. Apart from the vowels, you have a small sign. And these small signs are what?
Accent.
They are the accents. They serve a So here's the first use of the accents: to indicate the syllable to be stressed in pronunciation. To indicate or to point out the syllable that is to be stressed or emphasized in pronunciation. For example, in the first three words of Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, the last syllable is to be stressed, as you saw already. Sheath has an accent mark. Ra has an accent mark. Him has an accent mark. In each of these three words in the beginning of the Bible, the last syllable of each word is to be stressed. Bereshith, bara, Elohim. So it indicates the syllable to be stressed in pronunciation. But in Hashemayim and in Haaretz, the accent is on the second to the last syllable. Notice this. Hashemayim. Notice that this is the syllable right before the last syllable. The accent is not on the last syllable now. The accent is on the syllable before the last syllable, the syllable ma. In the first line, the accent was supposed to be on the last syllable of each word. But in Hashemayim, the accent is on the syllable immediately before the last syllable. And the same thing is true with this final word, haaretz. We find that retz is the last syllable, but on the syllable immediately before it, there is an accent mark indicating that I should slow down and pause a little bit before pronouncing the last syllable, haaretz, haaretz. So the emphasis is on the syllable immediately before the last syllable. Now, in addition to functioning as pointing out which syllable is to be stressed or emphasized, the second use of the accent is that it functions as punctuation marks. It functions as punctuation marks. That is, they divide the verse into its logical parts. Two major punctuation marks are: one, you have a vertical line, a short vertical line that is written to the left of the vowel. Here is the word, and there is the short vertical line written to the left of the vowel kames, a. That's a punctuation mark. This punctuation mark is called siluk. This is a Hebrew word, which means that there is to be a pause. And it always appears under the last word of a verse, as under haaretz, 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 at the end of Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. The siluk is the greatest stop in a verse. This symbol here, this accent symbol, which is a punctuation mark, is the greatest stop in a verse and is followed by the sign, two diamond-shaped dots called sof pasuk, sof pasuk. That is, in English, end of verse. So this accent mark indicates where the verse ends. It's a punctuation mark. It indicates where the end of the verse is. Number two, another major punctuation mark is this shape here that we saw in the previous screen. It looks like a semicircle with a little projection going up at the top. It's called Athnak. Athnak, as under the word Elohim in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. This accent mark is the second greatest stop and divides the verse into two logical parts. I will go back shortly to the previous screen so that you'll better see it. In the beginning, God created. That's the first half of the verse. That's where this accent causes you to pause and realize that you're coming to the first half, to the end of the first half of the verse. Then at the second half, you have the heavens and the earth, followed by the accent mark that shows you where you are to pause, which is the second half of the verse. Okay, let us look at the Hebrew Bible itself. Bereshith, that's in the beginning. Bara, created. Elohim, God. In the beginning, God created. Now notice at the end of this first line, you have the accent mark Athnak, a punctuation mark, dividing the verse into two logical parts. This is the first part, and this is the second part. So this is where the first part of the verse is ending, and this is where the second part of the verse is starting. Bereshith bara Elohim. So Athnak indicates that this is a logical division of a verse into two parts. 1, 2. Athnak. The second major or large stop in the punctuation. Okay, so another use of the accent is, and in addition to showing where the syllable is that should be emphasized or stressed, the accent acts as punctuation marks. They divide the verse into its logical parts, and you have Saluk, which comes under the last word of a verse, right before the last syllable. It's said to be the greatest stop in a verse, followed by these two diamond-shaped dots that indicates where the verse ends. And there is Athnak, which comes under the syllable him in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, and which is the second greatest stop, and divides the verse into two logical parts. Now here is another part of the function of the accent. The accent is also used as musical signs for chanting the scriptures in the synagogues. Take a look at the accent marks. I believe that the reason why they have to be shaped differently is that each of these marks are not only indicating where the syllable is to be stressed, and are not only indicating punctuation marks in the sentence, but they're actually symbols of different musical notes. And that is why if you were to go on the internet and type in on the browser for a rabbi that is chanting in the synagogue, you will hear the rabbi that is the spiritual leader of the Jewish community that is worshiping, not just reading from the Hebrew Bible, but actually singing a tune, actually singing the words of the Bible, because these different accents represent different musical notes. Just like how we have do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, and that forms the basis for different tunes. in our hymnals, you find that there are different notes, different shaped notes, and they indicate what the tune of that hymn should be. So in the Bible, in the Hebrew Bible, the different shapes of these accents are symbols of different musical notes. And so when the rabbi takes the Hebrew Bible and looks at the accent marks, he knows what tune he is to sing. So he's not just reading, but he is singing, reading. He is chanting. He's singing, reading what is in the Hebrew Bible. So these are the three uses. So let me just sum them up again. Three uses. First use, to indicate the syllable to be stressed in pronunciation. The second use of accents, they function as punctuation marks. And the third use is that they are used as musical signs for chanting the scriptures in the synagogues. Let me go over these simple rules
What
here.
about one?
Yes.
Yes, sir. I have a question. Um, there is one of the accent that we have looked at. You say that it is just like the full stop or the period that we have in English. So what about the other ones? Could we
All right, come to the microphone of the laptop. I'm not hearing you clearly.
Yes, sir. You have said that one of the accent that we have looked at, the two diamonds dot shape. So you said that they are just like the full stop or the period. What about the other ones? Could we say that like for the first one, which is used for a stop, the first greatest stop, could we say that it is like the comma and the second one like the semicolon?
Okay, well, that would be a good way to compare it with the with the English punctuation. What these two diamond-shaped objects represent is that this is the end of verse 1. It indicates the end of the verse. And in this section, it shows that you can use the accent as punctuation marks. So you have Saluk, which is at the last word of Genesis 1, verse 1, and that is said to be the greatest stop. The greatest stop, that's called Saluk. If you're to compare it to English, I think that it would be more accurate to say it is comparable to our full stop or period,
All right.
because the full stop in English is the greatest stop. Notice also that it comes at the end of the verse. This is the last word. And this accent mark is always under the last word of a verse. So I would compare it to the full stop, since it is called the greatest stop. Now, this other one is said to be the second greatest stop, called the athnak, the second greatest stop. I would say that would be like our semicolon, as you had mentioned earlier concerning one of these accents.
All right, sir.
That's how I would compare them.
All right. Now, if we were to write a verse on our own, so we could whether use the two diamond shape for full stop, or we could use the greatest stop that we have here, the siluk.
Well, the thing is that those two diamond shapes, yes, you could use them to indicate the end of the sentence. That's how it is in the Hebrew Bible.
All right. So any one
consistently.
of
You
them
you
is
see the
okay.
end of the verse when you have those two diamond shapes. There is not a clear equivalence. There is not a clear equality between the salute, for example, and the full stop, even though I've compared it to the full stop since it is said in the Hebrew to be the greatest stop, because you wouldn't really end the word at this syllable ah. A full stop indicates that you have come to a complete stop. And this is not really a complete stop. It's just a pause before you finish pronouncing the last syllable of the word. And then you come to an end before you begin the next verse. What I see in language, there's not always a clear correspondence or equivalence between an element of the language and another. And so even though I've compared it to a full stop, technically or specifically speaking, it wouldn't really work as a full stop because the verse doesn't really come to a full stop or complete stop until the whole word is pronounced. It's just a pause before the pronunciation of the last syllable.
All right, so I just wanted to know, like, if I'm writing something on my own,
Yeah.
how to use them.
Okay. Now, if you are using the last word in what you have written, the last word would have this sign before the last syllable. Okay, this is always written under the last word of a verse. Okay, so this is where you would put it. Now, if you reach the logical end of one part of a verse, you would put this other sign, this other accent mark, indicating that you're going to realize that you're coming to the end of one part of the verse and you're about to begin another part of the verse. So if the logical division of the verse comes at a certain point, like here, you would put this accent mark here. Let us say over the last syllable. I mean, under the last syllable. Because this divides the verse into its logical parts. This is Athnak, the second greatest stop. This is Siluk, the greatest stop.
So
Yes.
the first one, sir, it could be used almost like a conjunction, just to bring another clause to the first one that you have already written.
When you say the first one, do you mean Siluk or you mean Athnak?
Yes, sir. The one
Okay.
that you are
Pointing at?
yes, sir.
So you say that it can be used as what?
Um, well, based on the explanation that you have given, I understand that it could be used almost like a conjunction, like which helps you. So since you put this accent or this punctuation, you will be able now to bring another clause to the first part of your sentence.
Okay, well, remember that in Hebrew, well, not remember, you will be learning later on that there is a special word that acts as a conjunction, and that is the consonant waw, which has a half vowel. And let me show you a half vowel. This is a half vowel. We haven't learned it yet, but we'll be learning it soon. You have a conjunction consisting of, here is one. Here is a conjunction. We or ve. This is waw, and this is a half vowel underneath it. We. We means and. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
Yes, sir.
So
This is the reason.
this is a conjunction. This is really just to indicate the part of the verse that comes to an end, the first part of the verse, before you start the second part of that same verse. But I have not read or studied in the Hebrew language that this is used as what you say, a conjunction.
No, sir. I have said based on the explanation that you have given to us, I said it is like almost, but not because it is a conjunction. Because I remember that we have studied in communication studies that a semicolon is used to separate or to, yes, two clauses. Like if I say that I did not come to school today. Now I put a semicolon in order to give the reason why I did not come. I did not come to school today, semicolon, because blah, 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 blah. So this is what I'm saying. So when you use this, you are going to have then two parts, all right, in your verse before you put a full stop. So this is what I wanted to understand.
Oh, I see what you're saying. But
Yes, sir.
that wouldn't be a conjunction either, because in English, and, but, or, these are words that that are used in conjunction. But I understand the comparison you have made.
Yes, sir.
I would really say that when you put a colon, not a semicolon, but a colon, after a part of a sentence, and then you give an explanation after the colon in the remaining part of the sentence, that would be similar. That would be similar to what we have here.
All right.
That would be similar.
All
In the
right, sir.
beginning, God created, and then the rest of the verse tells you what he created, the
All right.
heavens and the earth. I would say that would be similar
Okay, sir.
to the
Understand.
colon. The colon is like the two dots, one dot over the other. And then you have in the remainder of the sentence in English, an explanation of the first part of the sentence.
All right, sir. Thank you.
Yes. Any other question or comment? Okay, so there are three uses of the accent. Now let me go back. So here are some important basic rules concerning accents. They're mostly placed on the last syllable. And in the Hebrew grammar, you would not see this symbol over the last syllable of a Hebrew word. You would only see this symbol, this arrowhead, if the accent comes on a syllable other than the last syllable. And it would be, this arrowhead would indicate that you are to emphasize a different syllable from the last syllable. And then accents are never placed on the second syllable before the last syllable. So if you have a word that has 3 syllables, the accent cannot go to that first syllable. The farthest that the accent can go in a word is the syllable before the last syllable. It cannot go anywhere further than the syllable immediately before the last syllable. So mostly the accent is going to be on the last syllable, but if it is going to be placed on any other syllable, it has to be placed on the syllable immediately before the last syllable, right in front of the last syllable. And it will be indicated by the arrow symbol that you see in number 2. Okay, now next week, God willing, next week, Friday, make sure that you have studied lesson number 9, accents, in preparation for your next test, which is going to be over accents. Any further question or comment before we end? Okay, now if you have any difficulties understanding this lesson, feel free to send in your questions so that I may be able to simplify it further. So your homework is simply to study this lesson in preparation for your next test, which is over this lesson on accents. Well, take care and may God be with you.